person
Well,
who's going to
thank you.
talk to us about plant food power and what plants fight disease, how they can be used to fight disease. So Billy is the Vice President of Nutrition and Communication for Green Juju. But before we get into kind of his hit list and all the reasons that we love him, I wanted to kind of ask you, if you were to tell like the origin story of the holistic superhero Billy Hoekman, what would it be?
I feel like that's a great introduction in and of itself already. So I'm like, all right, cool. See you later.
I kind of think of you as like the Spider-Man of holistic.
I'll take it. I'm a big fan of superhero stuff, so that's a good one. I'll take
Awesome.
that. You know, for me, I think that I am proof positive that if you want the information, it is there for you. So a good example of that is I am a 1-semester college dropout who wanted to do something different, and I proved. You know, I got my start. I was so poor I couldn't buy any books, but I would go to Barnes and Noble and have them all open. You know, I'm sure they love that. I had them all open and would take notes and do that part of it. So I really consider myself proof positive that if I can make a life of this and affect animals and get this knowledge, that really anyone can. And so I feel, having worked for the past 11 or 12 years in the industry, and kind of it's become something different than it was when I started.
Yeah.
But for me, it was really just self-sacrifice, hard work, and really just kind of trying to put myself out there. But the core of it was, unfortunately, my dog passed away about a month ago. But the core of it was her. When I got her, I said, "What do I feed this dog?" And that question never became uninteresting to me. I said, so I could think about nutrition. I mean, trust me, my wife would probably say it's pretty annoying. I talk about it all the time, and it is what I love to do. And so, I'll conclude that by saying I feel very lucky every day to be in the position I am and to work with people and to be able to create products and do, what I do.
Cool. Well, that's awesome, and we're happy to have you here. So, Billy Hoekman is, as I said, the Vice President of Nutrition and Communication at Green Juju. He's involved in formulation, product development, science education, and sales and marketing. Participates frequently in expert panels and speaks nationally and internationally in venues ranging from universities and conferences to public libraries. He's also served on the board of directors for Royal Animal Health University, attends Association of American Feed Control Officials meetings, AFCO, and has published numerous articles. He's a trusted pet health advocate, specializes in turning hard to understand nutritional concepts into plain English. That's kind of what I love about what you do, and I think why people respect you so much is you've made this kind of information so accessible to so many people to really just break it down and understand that it's kind of a no-brainer that what you feed your pet makes such a huge impact on their life.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept because essentially, if you start in nutrition and you start like studying it and you start like really focusing on it, you start to learn that, the foods that you love or the foods that you feed your dog are made up of all these different chemical structures. And we can look at how do these certain chemical structures, influence the body. But most people come back full circle to, yes, we can understand that different foods have different purposes, but all of these chemical structures are just going to be understood by the body.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's no reason to isolate these structures. There's no reason to do that. The body's going to break them down into where they need them to go anyway.
Right.
And so for me, it's like I came full circle back to like, I went from making homemade food and being like, well, I need to, focus on this nutrient, I need to focus on this nutrient, back into let's actually just make sure that we have a broad range of these really biodiverse foods.
Right.
And that's really the best we can do for ourselves and also obviously for our dogs and cats as well.
Cool. I've heard you talk a lot about raw feeding. I've heard you talk a lot about fermented goat's milk and dairy products. And I, with the work that you're doing with Green Juju, I would love to get kind of a broad answer about, what is the place of plant-based nutrition in the diet for a facultative carnivore like a dog or an obligate carnivore like a cat? Like, where does it fit in?
That's a really great question because plants have been really demonized in the pet food industry, and for good reason at the beginning, because essentially pet food manufacturers put plants into food because it was a cheaper source of what they're not good at. So
Right.
if you're talking about a dog or a cat, plants are not good at protein and plants are not good at fat, right?
Mm.
So they're talking about putting all of these, industrial seed oils, that kind of stuff, all of these omega-6, high inflammation plants,
Mm.
and then using, those isolates for protein. So what happened was there was a big movement to say like dogs don't need plants, but plants provide and one of the reasons I joined Green Juju, is this very like really fun, interesting way for me to affect dogs and cats diets in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
Plants are good at other things that those animal products are not as good at. So when we at Juju add plants, we're talking about adding things for organ health. We're talking about adding things for fiber. We're talking specifically about one of the things that we work on is different plant antioxidants. So if you look at any color in nature, it's going to be a different type of antioxidant.
Right. Okay,
right?
cool.
And so we focus on all of those things to bring those into the diet. So the great thing about Green Juju is if you're using, let's say, due to budget or due to time or whatever, you're using a processed diet, this is going to be an amazing way to add whole food. Either we do have both a Just Greens raw food blend and a new golden blend, which is orange-based vegetables like squash and golden beets. But we also have a green blend that also does self-ferment in the refrigerator.
Oh, wow. Cool.
So we do have, you can do the fresh, you can do the fermented, you can do both. And one of the big, I think, premises for me, in doing this, working for this company and wanting to join Kelly here was there was a study in 2005 from Purdue University that showed that animals that are eating kibble diets 100% of the time, if they get dark leafy greens 3 times a week, they were 90% less likely to get certain cancers.
Right.
So,
oh my God, that study's incredible.
Yeah, exactly. And so then you have the orange and yellow vegetables was 70% less likely. So why on earth would you not want to do that? So where I want to go moving forward is there's no way to absolutely predict health outcomes. So it's not like you can say, if you do this diet, your dog will not get cancer.
Right.
What we can do is increase the probability that they'll have a better health outcome.
Right.
So for me, it's like, we all understand these plant ingredients. If you're talking about, our Just Greens blend, and you're talking about kale, and you're talking about all these things that people understand are healthy antioxidant ingredients, why wouldn't you want to, take the chance and decrease your animal's, likelihood of getting cancer? So that's kind of where we sit with Green Juju is we want to make everyone's diet better, be it, kibble users, be it, my goal in the next, 5 years is to meet everyone where they're at.
Yeah.
I don't want to be judgmental. About
because people, I think there's this aversion to entry into the space at all because of how overwhelming it is, because there are so many different ways that you can start feeding a more species appropriate diet, and it's easy to feel wrong. But but what we always say, especially with cannabis medicine, with CBD, is like we are all learning, and it is always changing. Like I imagine it's the same thing in the world of nutrition. There are a lot of things that have always been true, but we're getting better and better at being specific about what these pets need.
And that's what I love about nutrition is exactly that, is you are constantly learning. I feel like for me in my own personal journey, and a lot of people's journeys, you kind of plateau and you're like, okay, you know a lot and this is how it is. And then all of a sudden you reach something else and the whole world just opens up for new information.
Yeah.
And you always have to be ready to be open to that. And you always have to, there are things that I thought when I first started my, nutrition journey that I was definitely wrong about. And so that's a good thing because we learn from those things. It's like when people do interviews and stuff, people have asked me like, are you afraid to be wrong? It's like, no, that's great if I'm wrong, because then I can actually check my reality and kind of, move forward with that. So, I started at Green Juju in June and it's been amazing. And since, starting, so.
And we're talking about using plant food as part of a diet. Like this is not, we're still working with dogs, cats, these animals that need a base of meat in their diet. So we're not talking about a vegan diet for dogs.
Yeah, so like a good example of that was we have freeze-dried treats that are organ-based, so they're heart and liver.
Oh, cool.
And then we accent that with those different plant antioxidants, right? And so we want all of those wonderful fat-soluble vitamins, the A, the D, the K2 from the organ meat.
Right.
We want those B vitamins, and we want all of that you know, the good amino acid profile protein, but we also want them to get the antioxidant, you know, part of that. And you know, I will give a shout out to cats, because I feel like we don't talk about cats enough. Cats love our treats.
Yeah.
And do benefit from the extra fiber and plant intake as well. It's just not a huge part of their diet,
Right.
you know, obviously.
Yeah, and that's, I think, something that I've discovered, you know, learning more about raw feeding, is oftentimes the fiber is not something that's in there. And so the digestive process is just so fast that they can't actually take in a lot of the nutrients that are in there, you know, and by allowing the digestive process to slow down, you can kind of have them absorb more. Is that?
Well, and even just working with, you know, dogs over the last 10 years with both diets that have plant-based fiber and diets that don't, I just find that dogs that have plant-based fiber in their diet have better digestion overall. Oh, and the other important thing too, when you're talking about plants, which I think does not get focused on enough, really in both human nutrition and in dog nutrition especially, and I would say this is true for cats, because you're not feeding the cat with certain things, you're feeding the microbiome. So what we know now is that the more plants that, so like for instance in our green blends, right, you're going to get a base of, like, you know, don't kill me for not knowing exactly how many ingredients are in it right here, but you're going to get a base mix of all different types of plants. And the more plants you introduce to the microbiome, the more different types of fiber, the more different types of nutrients that you introduce there, the better fed the microbiome is going to be, the healthier the microbiome is. And so I think that's important too. So a good example of that would be for all those people that are using, let's say, pumpkin for fiber.
Right. That's a common one.
We have a golden blend we just released, which has not only squash, but golden beets, and has turmeric, and has a full, you know, has cauliflower, has a whole baseline. This would be a better, not only is it raw, but it is a better baseline for providing multiple different fiber types, multiple plant, you know, nutrients, and will feed the microbiome better. So that's another thing I think people need to, like, consider more as well.
Yeah, and if there's anybody out there who has questions that you want to comment in live, we will be taking questions at the end. So tell us where you're from, say hello, and leave us a question for Mr. Billy.
We love questions.
We love questions. Can you, is one thing that I've also heard you talk about a lot is the fermentation process. Is that something that happens with these vegetables as well?
So we have one blend that is, so I actually figured this out after joining the company. So Kelly was, my boss was so brilliant that she didn't realize that she even developed a fermented product. So she developed this amazing raw product. So I was using it for about 10 days, and I obviously have, you know, experience in fermentation. So I was smelling it, and I was like, oh, it smells like acetic acid. And I was like, oh, this
What is acetic acid?
So acetic acid is the acid that's produced essentially from fermentation. So the best way to describe it is, you know,
like the byproduct of the things you're eating?
Yeah, like the vinegar. So like the vinegary, so if it's kombucha, or, you know, that's acetic acid. So, or like fermented vegetables, so pickles, that kind of stuff. So it's the byproduct of that part, and it's actually really healthy, right? It helps control your blood sugar. There's a lot of health benefits to it. So I was smelling it, and I was like, oh, this smells fermented. And then I looked at the ingredient panel, and I said, oh, the second ingredient is cabbage, and the last ingredient is lemon. So you have the cabbage to introduce the good bacteria. You have the lemon to bring down the pH as an acidifier. So I started to, of course, do my nerdy thing and pulled out my pH tester and started to test multiple batches. What we found was after on an average, in 8 days in the refrigerator, it gets down to about a 4 pH, which is totally fermented. And so once that happens, it's good for another 2 weeks. So not only the coolest thing about that product, in my own nerdy mind, is that we obviously recommend rotating between different like blends, you know, because you get different nutrients. This is the first self-rotating product on the market, because you can buy the big tub, feed it fresh for 8 days, and it'll continue to ferment, and then you get another 2 weeks of fermented, so you get the raw, fresh, and the fermented in the same product.
Right, and the cultures are different every time you're using it.
Yeah, and the nice thing is, it's kind of like was very, like, almost fortuitous that, you know, we found this out after I joined the company. And and we do have some really, you know, we just released 4 products, but we do have some really cool stuff in R&D coming out in the spring. And around that timeline, I think that people are going to be really happy with,
Mm-hmm.
both not only for the nutrition nerds, because obviously that's my wheelhouse,
Yep.
but we also are doing things for people who don't care about nutrition, because they still love their cats, they still
Yep.
love their dogs. So we
Yep.
want to make products
Right.
that appeal to all those people.
Sure.
In a
Less work. I don't want to know why it's working. I just want it to work.
Exactly. We want to help those people and their dogs and cats as
Yeah.
well. And
I hear you, because I feel the same way. Oftentimes I'm like, I don't want to go through everything to learn what Billy Hoekman knows. My brain would explode and I probably couldn't get there. So like, I just want to trust that he can do it and can tell me what to do.
Well, I'll take it. It's a very, I just think with what Green Juju is doing,
Mm-hmm.
we'll be able to, especially, now, but in the future, be able to grow and affect just that many more bulls. And I think that's why we're all here. I think,
Yeah.
It's important to look at all of the things that we're doing,
Mm-hmm.
as different companies that are all working towards the same goal.
Yeah.
Right? We're all a piece of the puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what Green Juju's always wanted to be. And that's why I'm so excited, to be here and talk about plants and how they're so applicable to dogs and cats, even though, they're carnivores
Well, we love plants. And one thing that I heard you say on podcast, It's a Dog's Life with Angie, is, I don't use supplements, really. The something to the effect of, I don't use supplements, but like my food should be my medicine.
Exactly.
And
like I use whole foods,
Yeah.
right? And so, and all of that plays into, everything that we're all trying to achieve health-wise. And
Mhm.
so, I like how you're like, oh, we like plants, really?
We really like plants. We really
It's like
do.
they really like plants. So for me, yeah, it was, and for also, another reason too was I did want to, it was a really interesting challenge for me too, to be able to work in a different space, in
Yeah.
regard to, nutrition and plants and,
Mhm.
and how to do that. And so it's been,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So before you did a lot of work, like designing diets for specific ailments and
Mhm.
conditions. Is that still something that you do and that you work with, or?
So we don't, so we're not, we are going to be working with, obviously we're at a vet conference now. So we
Yeah.
are obviously looking to work with vets in, particular ways.
Mhm.
We don't have the capacity. So we're additions to diets, right?
Sure.
So we
Right.
can say, hey, add this ingredient or add this because, your dog is dealing with, people still email me and they'll say like, oh, I'm having this issue and I'm happy to suggest some things.
Sure.
But we're kind of in a different space.
Yeah.
Very proud of the work I did, in creating those, in creating health protocols and helping so many animals cross country.
Yeah.
But for us, it's kind of like we're entering into that space of like, especially people who are just trying to get their feet wet.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah,
so,
yeah. Okay.
and it's kind of a different thing, but it's a really exciting thing. So that's kind of, how we do that. But look for us to be working with vets in some really creative ways in the very near future.
Awesome. And what about, so are there specific plants? You've talked a lot about leafy greens. You've talked about like the fibrous orange pumpkins
Yeah.
and stuff. What are the different like kind of strengths of the plants that you regularly use at Green Juju?
Well, one of the things I think that people, you can go through and let's say you like, Googled like, okay, this plant is high in this, this, and this.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I always try to like get across is that the reason why we blend so many plants together is
Mhm.
they're all really they're all working towards the same goal, but in
Right.
slightly different ways.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
in slightly different antioxidant profiles. But I will tell you some of my favorite ingredients. They're, in my
Yeah, give
opinion,
me the hit list.
kind of the unsung heroes of both our Bailey's blend and our Just Greens. Is one of them has parsley and the other one has cilantro.
Yeah. Oh
Now-
my God, they're incredible.
Exactly. So one of the things that's interesting to me is when they do studies for, so when they look at antioxidants. So there are
Mhm.
different ways to measure antioxidants, and there are limitations in some of these.
Mhm.
So the science is actually kind of interesting because you can measure the antioxidant capacity in a food, but how much does that actually affect the thing eating it? That's the
Sure.
part that's in debate, right?
Right.
But you can measure the antioxidant content and know that we're getting these positive things.
Okay.
So one of the things I think is really interesting is whenever they measure the antioxidant content of herbs and like things that people use for seasonings like pepper and things like that, and especially herbs like the cilantro and parsley, they're much higher in antioxidants. And that's because of, so when you smell cilantro, and you're not one of those people the soap people, you know what I'm talking about? The people that can't do it. Like I love cilantro.
Oh, I'm
actually
so happy that I'm not one of those people because I really love it.
No, Emily makes tacos out of it's actually kind of crazy. She makes cheese enchiladas that are, the shell is cheese.
Oh wow.
So she like bends it up and like
cheese?
Yeah, it's really interesting. But
Wow.
she tops those with cilantro and it's like a salad on top, right?
Okay.
Because we both love cilantro so much.
Yeah.
But it's that very smell and those very oils that actually make it that high in antioxidants.
Absolutely.
So it's the little things like that that I think are going to really set, green juju apart. And the fact that, you're dealing with some of the ones that people talk about all the time when you're talking about, kale and like broccoli with the sulfur,
Sure. Yeah.
compounds. But
before you move on, it's like I just want to touch on that too, because the smells, the things that we also talk about how often animals are drawn to the things that they need. But it's similar with the cannabis plant. Like a lot of the things that give a hemp flower its bouquet are the things with a lot of therapeutic value.
Yeah.
A lot of the terpenes, that make it smell lemony or piney, those have anti-inflammatory properties and cardioprotective properties. So it's they kind of like wave and have a sign of like, hey, I'm going to be good for you.
Yeah, we're all made of the same things.
Yep.
And so it's not like this foreign thing that, and that's why food works, is because we all evolved from the same thing. So we're all part of the same, which is kind of, I don't know, like beautiful in a way that we all evolved into this, coexistent thing where we can all benefit from each other.
Right. Instead of thinking of ourselves as separate from our animals, even though they do have a different system, a different nutritional needs.
Yeah.
The kales and the broccolis, as you're talking about, those are, we think of that not as dog food a lot of the time, but it's fantastic for them.
Yeah, and our I gotta say our blends smell incredible.
Yeah.
So when
Could I eat them?
We can't tell you to do that because we are a pet food company. But we do encourage, if you do make your smoothies and stuff, it'll be a lot of the same ingredients.
Yeah.
But they do smell incredible, and I think too for those listening, and especially if there's like some store owners watching this, they are easy to understand ingredients. It's not a huge education to show someone and say like, kale, celery, cauliflower. These are things that people look at and go, oh, they're healthy. So the education piece is a little bit easier, which is nice as well.
And it's all raw. It's not cooked.
Yeah, it's not cooked. So we actually do a process that lets the nutrients be more absorbable that no one else does.
That's my question, because there are some vegetables that cannot be broken down by our stomachs. I know.
Yeah.
Are there certain ones that need to be processed?
Well, so what we do is we actually juice them and then add the pulp back. So
cool.
So most people, if they're making like a blend or something like that, they'll just blend it up. So we're juicing it and then adding the pulp back, so it further breaks it down but keeps it absolutely in a raw food state.
Wow.
So they're able to, and it's all low carb. They're actually, so our green blends are 3% net carbs, and our
interesting.
Our our golden blend is about 6% carbs because there is squash in it, so it raises a little bit. But they're all low carb, so they're all applicable to if people are doing a ketogenic diet, if people are, and obviously like I would say the same thing for people as well. But when it comes to dogs and cats, they should be on a low carb diet anyway, because regardless of if they're doing a ketogenic diet or something, it should obviously all be low carb.
Right.
So
that makes sense. We've got a question here. Coco Sussner asks, what percentage of greens should I add to a raw fed diet?
So that's an interesting question, because every dog is really different. So like when you're talking about our product specifically, there is going to be a recommended dose on the carton there, but
by weight.
Yeah, it's by weight. So, but the interesting thing about that is, if you look at our Just Greens, right? It's highly nutritious, but it's only 9 calories an ounce. So it's really hard to overdo it. Like there's not going to be an animal that becomes overweight for eating too much just greens or too much Bailey's blend.
Can you have too much vitamin K, like in the
No.
mineral and vitamin content?
So the
overwhelm them?
vitamin K in plants is vitamin K1, which is a water-soluble vitamin, so
Okay.
it's totally fine. Vitamin K2, which you're going to find in things like organs and that, is
I think we're back.
okay.
Hello. Sorry, guys. We just our internet here is a little spotty in this lecture hall, but I think we're back. Let us know if you're still there.
It looks like
Hello,
it.
hello. I think we're here.
So going back to the greens question.
Yes.
So, but our thing is this: you don't have to measure out exactly what you're doing because it's just whole foods.
Okay.
So, like one of the things that my boss Kelly likes to say is, if you have a large dog, you do a large plop.
Yep.
Medium dog, medium plop.
Yep.
Small dog, small plop. And so I think that that's important. So I don't know if it's based strictly on a percentage, but I would say you don't want to do, if you're talking about net weight of the diet or the dog or based on like body percentage, you wouldn't want to do more than like 10% or something like that, probably. But again, every dog is different, so you just kind of have to like start somewhere and then search for what works. But for our products, low carb and totally raw, so you can kind of just free fly with whatever you want, in my opinion.
Fantastic. And you do bone broth as well, right?
Yes, we have two novel bone broths. We have a duck bone broth, which we just released, and then we also have a bison bone broth as well.
Okay.
And the bison comes from the best, in my opinion, bison farm in the country. It's grass-fed and grass-finished. They actually do field harvesting, so the animal doesn't go through any stress whatsoever.
Okay.
And so bone broth is an amazing source of protein. And by protein, I don't mean the amount. People are always obsessed with how much protein, but we need to talk about the structure of the amino acids. So those proteins in bone broth are free amino acids, which means the kidney doesn't have to do any work to actually filter out any of the waste because they're already applicable to the body.
Wow.
So, our bone broths, for my own dog, she was, when she was alive, she was born with a grade 3 luxating patella and also had some back leg tremoring, and I was able to manage those her entire life without surgery, mostly based on bone broth. So
wow.
I would highly recommend people get extra moisture into the diet, and also bone broth. All of those minerals, all of those nutrients are suspended in high moisture environments, are much easier to digest.
Right.
Because that's what nature does. Look at all the foods nature makes, puts it in a ton of moisture to be digested.
Absolutely.
So
cool. We've got another couple questions here. There's always a debate on whether we should create or formulate. Where does green juju fit in all of this? Is it used as a topper?
It's used, so if you're formulating a diet, here's how I go about. I'm about to, when I have dogs again, which hopefully happens soon because I have this giant hole in me where a dog used to exist. So I know it's the worst thing, but so what I'm going to do is I'm going to formulate the diet based on what makes up the most part of the calories, which is the animal-based products. And then I will add green juju on top of that because you're not going to unbalance a diet by adding green juju onto the top of it.
Right.
So that's kind of how I go about it. So if you're using a commercial raw diet, you can add, I would start with the recommended dosage on the carton of green juju, and then you can adjust if you want to. But that's kind of a good starting place.
Awesome. Very cool. We've got another one, and this one is from Lori Lee. Hi, Lori Lee. If anybody else out there has some questions, feel free to post them here. Lori Lee says, would these two products replace the need for a multivitamin daily? I think she probably means the Baileys and the green.
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely going to get, a high. The problem is I don't just think that there's a need for a multivitamin just generally.
Right.
If you're using like a food-based multivitamin, there's no reason why you can't, put that on top. But what
It's also kind of what you're just saying. The way that vitamins and nutrients appear to the body in nature are in a certain way. And the critique I often hear of multivitamins is that they're not very bioavailable.
Yeah.
And
you don't want to. I mean, synthetic vitamins are just, in my opinion, not the way to go generally, because they're a part of a vitamin.
yeah.
So like absorbic acid is not vitamin C; it's the outer layer of vitamin C. There's
Right.
there's other
Right.
things.
Yeah.
There's other parts of it. So instead of using a multivitamin, because you are going to get a lot of obviously vitamins and minerals from our products, but what I would do is I would focus on your fat soluble vitamins from those organ meats.
Yep.
Which again, we do have the treats, but if you're putting the organ meats in a diet, those proteins and fats, and then the water soluble vitamins especially will come from the green juju. So I'd rather formulate a diet using that than a multivitamin.
Right. Yeah, that it reminds me of kind of how I think of the difference between an isolated CBD and one that comes from the full spectrum.
Yeah.
When it has all of the other cannabinoids and terpenes and natural plant compounds that are bioactive, they work so much better than when it's just that one isolated compound.
Which is like turmeric as well.
Right. Yep.
It's not just curcumin; it's many things,
Yep.
and we're figuring that out. That, and that's what, going back to the very beginning of this interview, to loop it back around. I was talking about we eat these whole foods because they break down into all these chemicals, and our bodies are the ones that are good at interpreting those chemicals, not us.
Right.
We don't know that. We don't know everything about nutrition, but our bodies and our dogs and cats' bodies know how to assimilate this information. So that's why you go back to nature, and it would be true, with the full versus broad spectrum. And
very cool.
Oh, is there a debate on that? I hadn't.
There's a debate on it for some people.
I hadn't realized that.
People like to debate, and I do too, and I like to come with the facts and the receipts. We've got Jenny says, how much bone broth is suggested per day? Do you just mix in the food or serve it in a bowl? Is this like a big dollop, little dog, little dog?
I would say, so our recommended starting point is an ounce per 10 pounds, which I think is a good starting point.
Okay.
But I would always do double with my dog, given the health issues I talked about. Sure. You can always do more bone broth. And serving it just depends on what works for your dog. I know for whatever reason, I got into the habit of, I would feed it to Lua first and kind of get her, because bone broth is also high in collagen, right? Which is going to help build joints,
sure,
but it's also going to help line the digestive tract. So, I was like in uber nerd mode, and I was like, okay, I'm going to have her do this first.
Yep.
But a lot of people just put it in the bowl, and that's great too. It's just all about what works for your own dog.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. I do think, for my own nutrition and my pets, like, what is the best thing to feed them first? What is the stomach going to most readily accept? And the order in which you feed the different foods that you're feeding them. Is that something that you think about
bone broth is, and I would say for senior dogs, I would recommend 2 ounces per 10 pounds.
Okay.
And again, you're not going to overdo it. And the other thing about bone broth that's really cool is those proteins are so efficient that they actually reduce the body's need for protein just generally.
Wow.
So again, it's not the amount. So like if I was feeding Lua 4 ounces of bone broth a day, let's say that's only 4 grams of protein.
Right.
But the makeup and structure of the protein is like, for instance, a good example of this would be, I think this is the best way to understand it. I saw an ad for a cereal a number of years ago, and they said as many grams of protein as an egg. Well, that might be true, but it's not the same type.
Right.
An egg is actually the gold standard for amino acid arrangement and bioavailability. That is the scale by which other foods are. So it was disingenuous to say that. And so I think people need to focus on quality and
function.
You need a certain amount, but quality is a big part of that as well.
Cool. Another one we have here. Which one can be kept in the fridge for a week to ferment? The one
that would be the Bailey's blend. So I just want to be very plain about this. If you try to ferment the just greens, it will mold because it is a whole food. So that does not have the components to ferment.
But Bailey's green has the cabbage and the lemon juice.
Yes. So Bailey's blend, you get, I believe it's 22 days because you get the 8 days for fermentation in the fridge once it's thawed, and then you get another 2 weeks. So Bailey's blend does ferment. Just Greens does not. And it's another good reason to rotate between the two.
Right.
Because then you get the fresh you get the different ingredients, then you go into the fermentation, you get that part of it. Because remember, fresh foods offer health benefits that are as good as fermented foods. They're just different.
Okay.
They're a different type. Like fermented
Right.
foods, obviously, I think are amazing. Like
Sure. Right.
But
And we
they're
just had a talk that we were talking to Dr. Marlene Siegel all about the gut microbiome
Mhm.
and populating a diverse kind of docket of different bacteria that are really great for the system, and how you can supplement that and help correct it and make it more robust with fermented foods.
yeah, and we do. I totally just lost my train of thought. So that's
You're talking about fermented versus
so
raw.
we do because it's cabbage
Yep.
and because it's the lemon juice for the to bring the pH down. It's what's called a wild ferment.
Okay.
So all you're doing is you're bringing the natural good bacteria out in
Okay.
the products versus inoculating it with a specific strand. So
I
you
see.
can ferment it by, let's say you add a bacterial culture, or you add whey or something like that.
Right.
That's going to make sure that in most cases it's that specific culture that's growing.
I see.
But this is really cool because it's a wild ferment. So all you're doing is taking all the good bacteria in those and letting them grow.
Would that be more diverse than if
Yes,
you were
for sure. That would be, and you're getting more of those soil microbes in there as well, which is a big deal to be able to do that. And so the other funny story that we heard was that when we do product testing, so we're a Seattle-based company, and so in the past and for our new squash and golden beets and golden blend that we do. So what we do is we make one, and then we tell people, like, if you're in the Seattle area, we'll give you some and you can try it so we can get feedback on what's going on. And there was a lady who contacted us because she fed it out in the backyard, and some of it had fallen between the cracks, and a squash plant grew out of that. And I was like, that's how fresh our food is.
Cool.
Is that, we can help you grow your garden, apparently.
Wow.
So it's good to get the fresh and the fermented. So it's kind of a,
Cool.
Sorry, I'm trying not to slouch.
Oh my God, I know. I'm sitting. It's the stools are hard.
We
too.
did a photo shoot, with Angela and stuff, and I swear, like 6 times the photographer was like, "Relax your shoulders." I'm like, "I am." I'm like, "I am. This is how I relax my shoulders. I don't." I'm an awkward Midwesterner through and through.
Okay, we got another one here. Michelle asks, would bone broth be a good thing for kidney patients? I would assume so.
Yeah, so again, all of those proteins are going to be free amino acids. So basically, if your dog, let's say, eats beef, the body converts those into those free amino acids, and then the kidney has to filter the waste product from that. And that's where the sort of like, high kidney or high protein diet kidney thing that vets talk about comes from. So this is going to be all applicable, and then there's no waste to filter out. So that would be great.
It's like the perfect application.
Yeah, and then I think so if you add our bone broth and then you add our greens to that kidney, then you can get all of those wonderful plant compounds for detoxifying, organs and things like that. So it's a nice 1-2 combo.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I think that's kind of all our comments and questions.
Alrighty.
If anybody else has some out there, feel free to post it. This is going to be up afterwards. We'll post it, and the comments will be live. And can I put a pin on you?
We can do that after, maybe.
After?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't want to stab you.
Yeah, I don't want to get stabbed. So
I won't stab you. But thank you so much
absolutely.
for talking to us. And please follow Green Juju and Billy Hoekman. Check out these products that he's been talking about today. They're fantastic for all of your
Absolutely. Appreciate the opportunity, and thank you guys for listening.
Thank you, guys.